Good morning, my dear students. Welcome to another class on linguistics. So, in the last lesson, we are in the process of learning phrase structure grammar. And in the last class, we learned about the constituents of noun phrase. You learned about the different possibilities of what could constitute a noun phrase. There were 6 different possibilities, and we also dealt with a subheading inside that, which was different constituents of determiner. What could constitute a determiner? Now we have to go to the second part of what constitutes a sentence. So S is equal to NP plus VP. Sentence uh, contains noun phrase and verb phrase. Now let us look at the second component, verb phrase now, which is equally important. So let's move on to this class on the constituents of verb phrase. So in the first video of phrase structure grammar, I taught you some PS rules or phrase structure rules. And in that particular section, I told you that verb phrase is equal to auxiliary plus main verb. So that is our cardinal rule. Okay, so let's write it down. Verb phrase is auxiliary plus main verb. Main verb or just verb. You can just write auxiliary plus verb. So this is our first possibility of what can constitute a verb phrase. Now we have to look into closer detail on what can constitute auxiliary and what can constitute verb. Okay. So we have to divide this particular equation into two parts. What is auxiliary and what is verb? And we will learn in quite a detail about what can be the different possibilities of auxiliary and what can constitute verbs. So let us first look into the possibilities of what can be called as auxiliaries. So let's move on to what can constitute auxiliaries. Let us first look at, let me just put the first example as A. Let us look at a simple sentence. She sings. She sings. So let us do a tree diagram of this particular sentence. Okay. So S is equal to NP plus VP. NP is a noun, which is she, and it is VP that we are really concerned about. Let us split the VP here. So VP is auxiliary plus verb, and auxiliary here is verb is sing. We have to write verb in its first form. Okay, sing. And there is sings here. So the S actually means that it is present tense. Okay, so we can say it's tense. Auxiliary is tense, which is present. Okay, so the present tense of sing, and the subject is she. She is singular and it is present. The verb is present. That means it is sings. So sings comes when the subject is actually singular, when the noun is singular. Okay. So this is an example where a very simple example. The first example, she sings. We can do a tree diagram analysis of this and we can split it into NP and VP. NP is a single noun. VP is what we are concerned about. VP is auxiliary plus verb. First, we will remove the verb out of the equation. The verb is sing. Then we have to analyze what remains. എന്താണ് ബാക്കിയുള്ളത് എന്ന് നോക്കണം. So what remains is S, which stands for present tense. So the auxiliary here is tense. So let us rewrite that equation. Auxiliary can be tense. Okay. Auxiliary can be tense. Let me just rub this diagram and show you how we can rewrite the rule. So auxiliary can be tense. Tense either present tense or past tense. Either present tense or past tense. So this is our first equation. This is only an example. So this is the first possibility of what can constitute auxiliary. Auxiliary can be tense, either present tense or past tense. Let's move on to the second possibility of what can constitute auxiliary. So let's move on to the second example. Let me write the sentence. It's a slight variation from the last sentence we wrote. So we are doing she can sing now. She can sing. So let us do a tree analysis, a tree diagram analysis of the sentence. S is equal to NP plus VP. Let's just forget about NP here. NP is a noun. She. VP is what we are really concerned about. So VP can be auxiliary plus main verb. Okay. And we'll remove the main verb. Sing. First we will remove the main verb. Sing. And what remains is we have to account for can and the tense. So auxiliary can be here tense. And can is an example of model. Okay. It's an auxiliary verb or model. Okay. So tense is present and model is can. Okay. She, present of can is can and sing. She can sing. So according to this example, auxiliary can be tense plus model. So this is the second equation, second example of what can constitute auxiliary. So auxiliary can be tense plus model. Okay, so I hope you understood this example. Let us move on to the third example of third instance of what can constitute an auxiliary. Now, before going to the third example, I wanted to show something in past tense too. So instead of can, let's write could. She could sing. Let's do a tree diagram analysis. S is equal to NP plus VP. We are not doing NP at this point. Let's do VP. VP is equal to auxiliary plus main verb. Let's move the main verb sing first. In auxiliary is tense plus model. Here tense is past tense and model is can. Past of can is could. So here it becomes she could sing. Okay, so this is how we do a past tense example. So now let us move on to the third instance of what could constitute an auxiliary. So the third possibility of auxiliary is, let's do a simple example for that. She had sung. So we already did she sings, she can sing, and now the third one is she had sung. Okay, let's do a tree diagram analysis. S is equal to NP plus VP. NP is a noun. She. VP, first of all, auxiliary plus main verb. Let's remove the main verb sing here. And auxiliary here is, we have to account for had, which is perfective. Okay. And the verb is in the third form. Verb is in the past participle form. So we have to account for both these details. So first of all, auxiliary is tense. We have to show what tense it is. It is past tense because it is sung here. Okay, it is past tense. Then we have to show that it is perfective. The verb is in the form of perfective. So the tense here is past tense. And whenever you see perfective, Perfective has two parts actually. Perfective has two parts. First part is have. Second part is participle, past participle. We can represent that by writing en. Okay. So perfective has two parts, have and past participle. And past participle is always written as en. Okay, in a tree diagram that is. So whenever you see perfective, you can split it into two, have and en. Now let us write this sentence together. She, past of have is had. Past of have is had. And en plus sing. That means past participle of sing is sung. Okay, so she had sung. So I hope you get this. Now let us rewrite the possibility of what constitute an auxiliary. So according to this particular tree diagram we just did, the third possibility of auxiliary is tense plus perfective. Tense plus perfective. So we already learned three examples of or three possibilities of what can constitute an auxiliary. So the first one is auxiliary can be a tense. Second is auxiliary can be tense plus modal. Third possibility is auxiliary can be tense plus perfective. Now let us discuss the fourth possibility of what can constitute an auxiliary. So for this purpose, I'm using another example of a variant of the same sentence. She is singing. She is singing. Okay. Now let's do the tree diagram analysis again. S is equal to NP plus VP. NP is a noun which is she. VP is auxiliary plus main verb. And let us remove the main verb sing first of all. And let us discuss about auxiliary. So we have to account for this is. Is means it's present tense. Okay. And then we have to account for this ing. Ing means the verb is in continuous form or it's also called progressive form. So we have to account for the tense and we have to account for the progressive form. Now let us split this auxiliary according to that. So auxiliary can be split into tense plus progressive. So the tense here is present tense. And whenever you see progressive, you have to understand that progressive also has two parts. Progressive has two parts. First is be, a form of be, like is. Is a form of be. Other forms of be are am, are, was, were, etc. So progressive has two parts. First of all, be. Second is ing. Okay. So be plus ing. Progressive means be plus ing. Now let us add all this together. Present of be is. That's because she is singular. Okay. If it was they, it would have become are. Okay. And ing plus sing is singing. So I hope you understood how to do this tree diagram. Now let us move back and derive our formula for auxiliary. The fourth possibility of what can constitute an auxiliary. So let's rub this and write down our formula or the possibility of what can constitute an auxiliary. So the fourth possibility of auxiliary is auxiliary can be tense plus progressive. So we learned about four possibilities of auxiliary. Auxiliary can be tense, That's the first one. Second one is auxiliary can be tense plus modal. Third one is auxiliary can be tense plus perfective. Fourth one is auxiliary can be tense plus progressive. So I hope you write all this down. So let's move on to the fifth possibility. Now let's get into a combination of these four. Okay. So right now we have analyzed four different sentences. She sings, she can sing, she had sung, and she is singing. Now let's move on to the fifth sentence. She could have sung. Okay, അവൾ പാടിക്കാണും. So it happened in the past, but we are not entirely sure about it. Now let's do a tree diagram analysis of this particular sentence. So again, S is equal to NP plus VP. NP is a noun she. VP is auxiliary plus main verb. Let's remove our main verb sing first of all. And now let's focus on the auxiliary. Auxiliary, we have to account for a few things. First of all, we have to account that it is in past tense because we see could. We have to account that the tense is past. And we can see that there is a have and a past participle. That means that we have to account that it is perfective. So let's split auxiliary according to that. So auxiliary is first of all tense. What tense is it? Past tense. Because it's could. And then we have to account for the modal. So there is a modal which is used here, could. And we have to use it in the first form, which is can. So the second element is a modal. Can. Okay. Now we have to focus on the third element, which is perfective. And whenever there is perfective, we have to split into have, en. Okay. Now let's look at this. Past of can is could. And let's keep have as it is. And en plus sing is sung. Now let's look at it. She could have sung. So this is how we do a tree diagram analysis of this particular sentence. She, then tense plus modal plus perfective. Tense is past tense, modal is can, past of can is could, and then perfective is always have and en plus sing is sung. She could have sung. Okay, now let's rewrite the formula or the possibility of what can constitute an auxiliary. So the fifth possibility of an auxiliary is tense plus modal plus perfective. Tense plus modal plus perfective. So the first four formulas or possibilities of auxiliaries consisted of two elements. Now we are considering the possibilities of three elements in an auxiliary. Now this one has tense, modal and perfective. Let's look at the sixth possibility of what can be an auxiliary. Now let's do another sentence. The sixth sentence we are going to analyze is she has been singing. She has been singing. So it's a continuous progress. She has been singing for quite some time. പാടിക്കൊണ്ടേ ഇരിക്കുകയാണ് കുറച്ചു നേരമായി തുടങ്ങിയിട്ട്. So let's look at the sentences we have analyzed this far. So first we did she sings, then we did she can sing, then we did she had sung, then we did she is singing, then we did she could have sung. Now this sixth sentence we are doing is She has been singing. Okay, now let's do this. S is equal to NP plus VP. NP is a noun. She. VP is auxiliary plus main verb. Let's remove our main verb sing. Okay. Now in auxiliary we have to account for certain things. We have to account that there is an ing here. That means it is progressive. Then there is a has been here. That means we have to account that it is perfective. So let's split. And then there is always tense. Tense is actually present in every auxiliary. Whenever there is an auxiliary, we have to account for what tense it is. So let's split it into three. Tense. What's the tense? Has. Has vannadonde we can say that it is present tense. Okay. Then we have to say perfective. Perfective. Perfective is always have en. I told you already, whenever you see perfective, you have to write have and en. And then the third element is progressive. Progressive varumbo, you have to write be and ing. Okay. Now let's try and bring everything together. At this particular stage, what we are going to apply is morphophonemic rules. So let's apply morphophonemic rules. Present of have is has here. Only because she is singular. Okay. Because she is singular, present of have becomes has. Okay. And en plus b is been. B plus en. Been. Ing plus sing, singing. So let's read it all together. She has been singing. So I hope you understood how to do this. Here auxiliary has three parts. So tense is actually staple. In every auxiliary you have to account for what tense that particular sentence is. So here tense is present tense. Then we had two more components for this particular sentence. There is a has been. That means there is perfective here. And there is an ing attached to the verb. That means it is progressive. So perfective is have and en. Progressive is be and ing. Now let's just write all this together and read it using morphophonemic rules. Now let's rewrite the possibility of what can constitute an auxiliary using this particular sentence. So auxiliary can be. So this is the sixth possibility of an auxiliary. Auxiliary can be tense plus perfective plus progressive. Tense plus perfective plus progressive. Okay. Now we have finished 6 possibilities of what can be an auxiliary. Let's move on to the 7th possibility now. So now we have considered 6 sentences. She sings, she can sing, she had sung, she is singing, she could have been singing, she could have sung, she could have sung. Then we discussed she has been singing. And now let's move on to the 7th one, which is she could have been singing. Now, this particular sentence, we already discussed auxiliary with 2 elements, auxiliary with 3 elements. Now, this particular sentence, auxiliary has 4 elements. Let's discuss what they are. Let's do the tree diagram analysis. S is equal to NP plus VP. NP is a noun, she. VP is auxiliary plus main verb. Let's remove the main verb sing first of all. Now we have to discuss what all parts there are in this particular sentence. First of all, auxiliary has tense. Tense is a staple. You have to write that down first. Tense. Tense is could have been singing. Could means it is past. Okay, past. Then we have to account for some things. There is a model there, could. So we have to account for the model. And we always have to write it in the first form, can. Okay. Then there is a have been there. Have been means there is a perfective element there. So let's do that. Perfective. And whenever perfective appears, you have to write have plus en. And then there is an ing over there. That means we have to account for progressive element. So let's do a progressive too. Whenever progressive appears, you have to write B-I-N-G. Okay. Now let's read all this together. She, and then past of can is could. Have, let's just put have as it is. Have doesn't need support from anybody else. So let's put have as it is. And en plus b is been. And ing plus sing is singing. So that becomes she could have been singing. She could have been singing. So I understood how to do, so I hope you understood how to do this complex analysis. So in this particular sentence, auxiliary has 4 parts: tense, modal, perfective and progressive. So let's try and do that once again. Okay. So VP has 2 parts, auxiliary and main verb. Here auxiliary has 4 parts. We have to account for the tense. Always we have to account for the tense. So here it is past tense. And then there is a model here. Okay, could. That means we have to account for that. Model is can. Then there is a have been here. That means we have to account for perfective. Have and en. Then we have to account for this ing here. That means there is progressive. B and ing. Now we apply morphophonemic rules and read all this together as she could have been singing. So let's rewrite the possibility of what can constitute an auxiliary. So the 7th possibility of an auxiliary is tense plus modal plus perfective plus progressive. So the 7th possibility of an auxiliary is tense plus modal plus perfective plus progressive. So I hope you understood all these 7 different constituents of auxiliary. I will rewrite it on the board so that you can make it into a table and learn it by reading it in your own handwriting. That will benefit you, as I always say. So these are the 7 possibilities of what can constitute an auxiliary. So first of all, auxiliary can be tense. Example was she sings. Then second possibility is auxiliary can be tense plus modal. Example is she can sing. Then third possibility is auxiliary is tense plus perfective. That means an example is she had sung. Okay. And the fourth possibility is tense plus progressive. She is singing. And the fifth possibility is auxiliary can be tense plus modal plus perfective. She could have sung. The sixth possibility is auxiliary can be tense plus perfective plus progressive. She could be singing, or she could have been, she has been singing. That was an example we dealt with. And then the seventh possibility is auxiliary can be tense plus modal plus perfective plus progressive. She could have been singing. So I hope you got an idea about what can constitute auxiliary. Let's move on to the second element of our equation, which is verb. What can constitute a verbal? Okay, that's what we are dealing with now. So before discussing verbals, we have to deal with a second possibility of what can be verb phrase. So we have already discussed one possibility of what can constitute a verb phrase, which is VP is equal to auxiliary plus main verb or auxiliary plus verb. Now let's move on to a second possibility or a second equation of what can be a verb phrase. Let's look at that. So VP is equal to auxiliary plus B plus B complement. Okay. So VP can be auxiliary plus B complement. So this B can be anything. It can be is, are, was, were, am, etc. So that it can be different forms of be. It can also be, this particular be is called a linking verb. Okay, it's called a linking verb. It's also called a copula. It's also called a copula. Okay, so this particular form of be is called a linking word or a copula. Now, what is a be complement? And in addition to being different forms of be, it can also be like linking verbs like, current copulas like appear. She appears intelligent. I feel warm. Feel, seem, it seems good. The day seems good. Such verbs can also act as a linking verb. Okay. So it can be different forms of be or some verbs which actually conveys something. Okay, let's move on to the third element now, be complement. What is the be complement? Whatever happens after the be constitutes a be complement. Whatever completes the sentence after a form of be constitutes be complement. Let's write an example for this one. She is intelligent. So here she is noun phrase, is be. Okay, there is an auxiliary there too, but we'll discuss that. And this is the be complement. Intelligent is the be complement because it complements the be. ബി കഴിഞ്ഞ് വരുന്ന എല്ലാ എലമെന്റ്സും ബി കോംപ്ലിമെന്റ് ആയിട്ടാണ് നമ്മൾ കൺസിഡർ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. ഓൾസോ ഹി വാസ് ക്ലെവർ. വാസ് ഇസ് ബി ആൻഡ് clever is be complement. Let's do an analysis of he was clever. He was clever. Okay. S is equal to NP plus VP. NP is a noun. He. VP is, we have to split it into three. Auxiliary plus B complement. Auxiliary here is tense. He was. So it happened in the past. Now he is not that clever. So it's past tense. Okay. B, let's just put it like that. And B complement is an adjective here. Okay. Clever. You don't even have to label it as an adjective. Okay. I just did it for your convenience anyway. So past of B is was here. Only because he is singular. So he was clever. So this is how we do the second form of verb phrase. So there are two possibilities of verb phrase. Verb phrase has two possibilities. Auxiliary plus verb and auxiliary plus be complement. So there are two possibilities of verb phrase. Auxiliary plus verb and auxiliary plus be complement. So now let us move on to what can constitute a verb. What are the different forms of verb? Okay, whatever happens in the main verb section. That is what we are going to deal with. We'll do it with the help of some examples. So to discuss verbals is whatever happens in the main verb section in the verb phrase. So to discuss verbals, I have written down 4 examples. Let's analyze these sentences. Tom sleeps. Tom ate a mango. Tom became a lawyer. And Tom turned pale. Let's analyze these VPs. Okay, first of all, in Tom speaks, the verbal is a verb. It's a simple verb, sleeps. Okay, now in Tom ate a mango, the verbal is, there is a verb here, ate. And then there is a noun phrase, a mango. A mango is noun phrase. Okay, so verbal can be verb plus noun phrase. Again, became a lawyer. In that section also, verbal can be verb plus noun phrase. Verb is became, a lawyer is noun phrase. Okay, and the next one is turned pale. In that section, verbal is, turned is a verb and pale is an adjective. So there are 3 different possibilities of verbal. So a verbal can be a verb. A verbal can be verb plus noun phrase, or a verbal can be verb plus adjective. Okay, so there are 3 possibilities. Verbal can be a simple verb like the first sentence. Verbal can be a verb plus noun phrase like the second and third sentences. And verbal can be a verb plus adjective like the fourth sentence. Now we have to discuss about these 4 verbs. Sleeps, ate, became and turned. What kind of verbs are they? That is what we are going to learn now. So these 4 verbs, sleeps, ate, became, turned. These 4 verbs are different kinds of verbs. Now let's put a label to these 4 verbs. First of all, this verb, sleeps. Tom sleeps. That's a full sentence in itself. It doesn't want a support word after sleeps. Such sentences, such verbs are called intransitive verbs. So this is a intransitive verb. Tom sleeps. Tom walks. Tom drives. Such verbs are intransitive verbs. It doesn't need the support of another object after it. So such verbs are intransitive verbs. The second sentence in ate. Tom ate. But what did he eat? Or who did he eat? Okay, so Tom ate a mango. So the word which has a supporting word or an object is called transitive verb. Transitive verb. So ate is a transitive verb. Now, Tom became a lawyer. What if I say Tom became? But what did he become? So the became or become is actually a linking verb. It links us to the idea of what actually Tom became. So it's actually a completing verb too. It links the subject to the object. So it is called a linking verb. Became is a linking verb. And the final one, Tom turned. But what did he turn into? So Tom turned pale. So turned is actually called a middle verb. So it actually mediates between the subject and the adjective. So that is called a middle verb. So we have discussed four different kinds of verbs using examples. Sleeps is an intransitive verb. It doesn't need the support of an object. Ate is a transitive verb which has the support of an object. Became is a linking verb. And finally, turned is a middle verb. So four different kinds of verbs: intransitive verb, transitive verb, linking verb, and middle verb. So this brings us to the end of this particular class on constituents of verb phrase. So I hope you understood everything. So what we dealt with in this particular class is there are two possibilities of what can constitute a verb phrase. That is written on the board now. Verb phrase can be auxiliary plus verb, or verb phrase can be auxiliary plus be complement. These are the important rules, but we also learned about what can constitute an auxiliary. Auxiliary, there are 7 different possibilities of what can constitute an auxiliary. And then we learned about verbals. For 3 different possibilities of verbals and 4 different kinds of verbs. So in entirety, this constitutes the constituents of verb phrase. So I hope this class was beneficial for you and that you were able to follow everything I wrote on the board and I told you in the class. And if you didn't understand, you can always put it in comments so I can help you better. And also, just watch the previous videos on phrase structure, grammar, and noun phrase to have a better understanding of this topic. So thank you for watching it till the end. Have a good day. Bye.